I'm going to start today's video by showing you how to set up your dissecting area. I have a plastic table here, so it's not porous. It won't absorb any of the fluid that the pig heart has, and it's also very easy to clean. So whenever you're dissecting, you're going to start by cleaning your surface. So I'm just using a general multi-purpose cleaner. You can use whatever you have on hand. Dish soap is even fine in a pinch. So now the table is clean. And I'm going to put this in the trash bag that I've attached. Let me just move the camera over for a second. And so I have a little plastic shopping bag over here. Okay, so now that this is clean, I am going to put my gloves on, because you always want to put your gloves on before you start touching anything that might have worked on any specimens. Okay, so gloves are on. Make sure that they're covering your wrist. Okay. I also have a long sleeve shirt. You know, in lab we would be wearing a lab coat, but most of us don't have lab coats at home, so I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt. I'm now going to get a paper towel, and I'm going to put my dissecting tools so that they're handy. So I have the forceps, I have the scalpel, I have the scissors, and I have the pointer and the mall probe. Okay, so those are available to me when I need them. And I'm also going to take out my dissecting tray. So your kits came with, let me put it that way. Your kits came with a foam tray. I happen to have this, dissecting tray with a rubber mat at my house. So this is what I'm going to be using. So whenever you're setting up your lab, think about safety and ease of access, right? So my tools are all here. I'm going to keep them here. I have a nice wide area for dissecting, and just to the left I have a trash bag so I can easily dispose of stuff while I'm working. So here is my setup, and before I go any further, I'm going to introduce my lab assistant. And it is totally fine for your kids to be around. It's best if you can have a window open so there's air circulating, but it's also best if you can have a window open so there's air circulating for yourself. I make sure that my kids are kind of out of the way of scalpels, but we're all remote schooling, and so what better way to do a little science than to kill two birds with one stone, right? Okay, so when you get your pig heart, it is in 2 bags. So let's take off the rubber band and take the heart out. Sometimes the specimens have a lot of fluid. These do not seem to have too much fluid. If it was really wet, I would take it to probably my bathroom sink and drain it out. Or if you have a utility sink, that's great. I try to keep my lab stuff and my food stuff separate, so I would only use a kitchen sink as a last resort. It's not super dangerous or anything. I just try to keep these things separate. If you have to put any fluid into the sink, run the water for a little bit of time, like a minute or so afterwards. Okay, so I am going to open the heart by cutting open the bag with the dissecting scissors. Again, so these scissors are usually used for specimens, but because we don't want to contaminate our home scissors, we're going to just use them to open this up. And now that I've opened this up, you can see more fluid than I thought was there. So I'm just going to put it to the side and make sure I handle this appropriately when I'm closer to a sink. Okay, so we're going to look at the outside of the heart. Okay, and so we have right here, the heart is surrounded by pericardium. And there's the outer surface is called the fibrous pericardium. And then the inner surface of the fibrous pericardium is called the parietal pericardium. And we'll cut this off shortly and see what that looks like. We have some blood vessels over here. The thickest, largest one is the aorta. So when you find that really thick vessel, you know you're looking at the aorta. The other ones are a little bit trickier to find, so we'll work on that as we go. Okay, so the fibrous pericardium on your pig heart may have a lot more fat than this one does. The sheep hearts that we often dissect just are covered in fat. This one has very little. There's just a little bit right here. Okay, so I'm going to cut off the pericardium, and so this is a good scissor job. Okay, and so outside again is the fibrous pericardium. On the inside, this really shiny layer is the parietal pericardium. And this outer layer of the heart is the visceral pericardium. So when we say visceral, we're talking about organs. So the outer layer of an organ is going to be the visceral layer. And then the layer that faces the visceral layer is the parietal layer. So in between these layers is going to be fluid. And so since our heart beats 24/7, there would be a lot of friction there if we didn't have the fluid. Okay, so the fluid protects the heart. Okay, I am going to continue to remove this covering. Okay. And so now we can kind of see the reason why hearts are shaped like this, like the graphic or the shape a heart. You can see that design right there. Okay, I am going to finish removing the pericardium. Okay, that's a little tough. If you hit a spot that's too tough to cut, just kind of move to the side. Okay, and so now I have the pericardium, and you can see that this is the fibrous side and this is the parietal side. Okay, so we have the heart, and we now have to figure out what part of the heart we're looking at. So I've already mentioned the aorta. Let's see what other things we can find. So when we flip this over, we have this flap over here. And this flap is called an auricle. And the heart has two auricles. So here's one auricle, and here is the other auricle. Okay, your auricles may be this brownish gray, or it may be more of a beigeish color. Okay, so there's a little bit of variation. They tend to be darker than the rest of the heart. Once I've found the auricles, I can find the pulmonary trunk. And when I'm teaching, I always tell people, find that pulmonary trunk first, and then you can, that's kind of your anchor. If you know where the pulmonary trunk is, you know that the aorta is behind it. And then you know that the superior vena cava is behind that. So we have our auricles and we have our pulmonary trunk. Okay, so we're going to look at some of the landmarks of the heart. And so I have like this little chunk taken out of my heart. You're going to have some anomalies like that. And, you know, it happens. But this was not there before the pig died. So we have the auricles and we have the pulmonary trunk. Coming down at a diagonal from the pulmonary trunk is the interventricular sulcus. Okay, that interventricular sulcus is where the right and left ventricles divide. And if I dug into this a little bit, I would find the great cardiac vein and the anterior interventricular artery. Okay, these auricles are actually flaps that increase the volume of the atria. So the atria are above, the ventricles are below, and right here is what's called the atrioventricular sulcus. So we have two sulci or grooves that we're responsible for. Okay, so on this side, this is the pulmonary side, and this is the systemic side. And if you squeeze the ventricles, you can really tell the difference between the right side, which goes just to the lungs. Its walls are much thinner than the left side, which pumps blood all the way through the systemic circuit. So on the back side of the sheep heart, you have that pulmonary trunk, you have the aorta and the branches of the aorta, and then you have this big opening, big floppy opening, and that's the superior vena cava. So the superior vena cava opening is actually much larger than the aorta, but the wall is very, very thin, and that's because venous blood is under very low pressure. It's just kind of trickling back into the heart. I have this kind of more sturdy Mall probe than the one that came with your dissecting kit. And what I just did was I took the Mall probe and I put it through the superior vena cava, and I kind of wiggled around until I found the inferior vena cava. You would be able to do the same thing by holding your forceps together and kind of pushing through, okay? The pig is dead. It does not mind that you're poking around its heart. You might put a hole in a place that you didn't mean to, but that's okay. We're learning here. Okay, so I am going to cut here so you can see what that looks like. So I'm just using my dissecting scissors and I am cutting through along where the Mall probe is. Okay, you do not have to do this. I'm doing this so you can see it, but it actually will probably be better for your dissection in the long run if you don't do this cut. Okay, I'm going to take the probe out. And this tissue is not, it's really sturdy tissue, so it's not going to be easy, okay? But what I wanted you to see, hopefully we can see it, yes, so there's this muscle right here, this kind of rigid muscle, and that's called the pectinate muscle, okay? So it kind of is like this comb-like shape, and you really only see this in the atria, okay? All right, so now that we've done that, so now we know where the superior vena cava is, the inferior vena cava, the pulmonary trunk, and the aorta, we are going to cut open the heart. So cutting open the heart is a little tricky, mostly because, again, the heart is a very thick muscle. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've just been kind of removing things that I know are fat or connective tissue so it can stay out of the way. And I just had a really good reminder. Please make sure that everybody, if you have long hair, you have it up. My hair is up, but it's falling a little bit, and so it's getting into my face. much better to have it tucked up than later today looking at your hair and going, is that pig heart or is that something else? Okay, so let's keep the specimens out of our hair. All right, so I am going to now cut the cut the pig heart. We usually use sheep. And I'm going to cut it all along this edge, okay? And so I'm going to have a anterior and posterior piece. Okay, so this is a frontal section. All right, and you know what? Sometimes this works great and sometimes it doesn't. And so you never want to cut towards your hand. So I'm going in and I'm trying to be very smooth. You do not want to be like Jack the Ripper. You don't want to go like so smooth cuts. If you have to go in and out like I have to right now because the left side is so thick, go nice and slow, nice and smooth. Okay. And so right now I'm coming around the apex of the heart. And see how I continue to move my hand so that I'm not cutting towards my hand. Okay, and it's getting close to my thumb, so I'm going to come around. And it makes a great grizzly crunchy sound. Okay, so I've gotten the outside portion, but there's still more to cut, right? And that is the way it is. So we just kind of keep cutting. Okay, so I'm on my second round, keeping my hands out of the way of the scalpel. Okay, I learned this at a knife class, a cooking knife class. There's this claw technique, so you kind of hold it like this. So your fingertips are not where the blade is, but you're holding the organ down tightly. Okay, so we're getting there, getting some interior structural views. And I have to say that this pig heart is considerably bigger than what I am used to working with. The sheep hearts are pretty tiny in comparison. Okay, so continuing on. This is making my daughter giggle. Okay. Oh, we're getting there. We're almost done. Almost done. One more little cut. And so you may end up with a different view than I have. Okay, so this again is the anterior of the heart. So I'm looking at the back side right now, the posterior part of this section. And so I can see the atria, the right atria is a little bit tricky to see, but I can stick my finger in this left atria. Here's the wall of the left ventricle. Here's the wall of the right ventricle. And this really thick wall is called the interventricular septum. A septum is a wall, so this is the interventricular septum. Over here, we can see the valves. So here we can see a little bit of the bicuspid valve, and here it's the tricuspid valve. And the way I remember which is that you I'm sorry, I just did that backwards. Tricuspid valve, bicuspid valve. The way I remember which is you try before you bi, right? So the tricuspid is on the right and the bicuspid is on the left. And here are our heartstrings, the chordae tendineae. and the chordae tendineae hold the flaps of the valve so that it doesn't go backwards, and so that valve can function to prevent backflow. Okay. So let's see, what else can we find here? Ooh, you know what? This is a really nice cut because, so let's just follow the path of the blood. So it goes in the superior vena cava, it goes into the right atria through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, and we can only see a little bit of the right ventricle. The right ventricle is really pretty small, but we can see the flaps of the tricuspid valve, and we can see some of the chordae tendineae. We can also see the papillary muscles, which hold down the chordae tendineae. Okay, and then that blood is going to go out. Oops, out. I have to find my pulmonary trunk. Okay, so I can stick my finger in there, and my finger is now in the pulmonary trunk. So right here, you can, if you want, take your forceps and you can kind of wiggle it down, and you'll be able to see where that is in the right ventricle. Once the blood goes out the pulmonary trunk, it's going to go to the right and left pulmonary arteries, get oxygenated by the lungs, and then it's going to come back in through the pulmonary veins. And the pulmonary veins are really pretty fragile, so often you just end up with a hole in the back of the heart. We actually have not too bad over here. So there should be 2 pulmonary veins on each side. And I have all 4 pulmonary veins in this one. That's great. Sometimes they just get torn out, and so you end up with a big hole. Okay. So oxygenated blood is going to come in from the pulmonary veins, and I'm going to open the heart, and you can see my finger in that left atria. Okay. The blood's going to go down through the bicuspid or mitral valve. Okay, and so we have the chordae tendineae and the papillary muscles of this valve. And then it's going to come up, go through, this is the aortic semilunar valve. And often you do not get to see the aortic semilunar valve in a dissection. I just happen to be lucky. So here's one of the flaps of the semilunar valve, and if you look at it, it does look like it's a moon-shaped flap. Okay, and then blood's going to go out through the aorta. Let's see, at the base of the aorta, I think there's a chance we might be able to see it, and this is really just luck. Yeah, so at the base of the aorta, you can see that there's vessels going off to the right and the left side. And those are the coronary arteries that deliver blood to the heart. Okay, you know, when you're on a plane and they say to put your oxygen mask on first, the heart puts its oxygen mask on first by delivering blood to the oxygenated blood to the heart muscles first. Okay, and then we can see some of the branches of the aorta, and you're going to learn these branches in next week's lab when we go over blood vessels. Okay, so hopefully this video is helpful for you in dissecting your pig heart. Once you've done these dissections, make sure you use the T-pins to label the various sections and structures that are listed in your most important points. And I strongly recommend that you read through the portfolio assignment before you do your dissection so you get all the photos that you need, okay? And, you know, just kind of take it easy, step by step. You don't have to do it all at once. So if you want to take the pig heart out and you know, find all the landmarks and then put it away. If you are going to store it at all, put it back in the plastic bag that it came in and get as much air out as possible, and then put the rubber band around. When you're done dissecting, you want to rinse off your tools and make sure they are thoroughly dry. These tools will rust if they're not thoroughly dry, and it's not very fun working with rusty tools. Once you've rinsed them off, take your scalpel, and if you still can use the blade cover, use the blade cover. Put all your tools away in your dissecting kit. Again, make sure they're thoroughly dried before you do that. Okay, then you're going to take the heart specimen and you're going to put it in the bag. And again, remove all the air that you possibly can. These do not need to be kept in your refrigerator. None of the specimens do. And then just tie the rubber band around it tightly. Okay. You have a styrofoam dissecting tray, so just rinse that off. If any materials start sticking to the tray, use some dish soap. Dawn is a really great dish soap for removing oils. So I always have some Dawn at my house and in my lab to work with that. Make sure your tray is fully dry, and then you can store all of these in the box that the specimens came in. At the end of the semester, you'll be able to reach out to the company that we got the specimens from, and they will dispose of your specimens for you. Again, I hope this video was helpful, and please post any questions you have to the Community Help Forum. Have a great day, everyone.